I'm leaving the meeting.
I'm out of here. Recorded? What? How did they pick that voice? Right? I mean, was James Earl Jones busy? JL, are you there?
Hey.
There?
Yes.
Awesome. Who you're our sole participant so far today. Who's over there with you, JL?
My kids, Kellen and Kimberly.
All right, Kellen and Kimberly, welcome everyone to our fifth and final of the NorCal Leadership Retreat with the Raising Placer and Granite Wellness Center. I take a deep breath and look back at the other sessions we've had, from, disc golfing with Serenity and, Dan with the cultural stuff out of the gates. They had the game changers. We've had Raza and J. Ross Pirelli. And all of that was to lead up for our session today. A reminder, my name's Scott Amick. I'm your facilitator, also known as the Hype Man. And I'm here to introduce Mr. Jeremy Bates, the Hope Dealer. For all of you that are not live today, when you come back and watch this at a later date, oh man, by then it's going to have aged well. Jeremy will have fixed all the it's going to be perfect the way it is, Jeremy. We're really looking forward to having you today. And kick it off, Jeremy. What do you have for us today? What are we going to be engaging in?
We're engaging in a little thing that we're calling truth talk today. Truth talk. I'm not sure if y'all are ready, but when you guys reached out and we're like, let's talk about hope and inspiring people, a lot of stuff's been happening this last 10, 12 months. And I think that if anything we can do in this time is just to have some real conversations about what things really are, practical things that we can actually incorporate into our world that will help us stay focused and attentive to the things that really matter. Because as we've probably all experienced, when things start to get shaken up, we start to lose who we are and all of it and what matters most. And this really is actually the time to refocus on that. And so in the time that we have, I would love to speak to you guys a little bit about some things to consider, what we call truth talk. But before we get started, the one thing that we probably want to know more about, not just the people that are on the call, but the people that are out there watching, is who am I? And I start with this not because I like to talk about myself or kind of get into that frame of reference. It's really about understanding if we're going to inspire people, we need to connect at an individual level. And so for you to be on this call, to know a little bit about me is what's going to help you attach to this message. And it's also a reminder, if you're doing any kind of advocacy work or doing any kind of leadership stuff, it's really, if you're trying to inspire people, it's not so much just about letting people know who you are. It's about showing who you are so people can relate to that. So just really quickly, my name is Jeremy Bates, the Hope Dealer, as I'm known. I've been traveling around the globe the last, 14 years now, inspiring people to see a little bit bigger, maybe to see themselves a little differently and redefine some of the truths that they have in life. And along that process, I do a lot of work with schools, with the military, with corporations, with staff, with community organizations, anybody that is really working either with young people specifically or just trying to figure out a little bit more about who they are so they could be better in who they are. There's stuff about, I love music, as you can probably see behind me. I love traveling. I love my family, which brings me to the next spot. I normally don't try and share much slide-wise, but I'm going to share the screen so you guys can see. We'll share this. Because part of knowing me is seeing who these people are. Because if you know me as anything, it's not just the Hope Dealer or somebody that loves music or traveling or culture, all this stuff. It's really, this is what I love most. And so if you want to know me, I want to introduce you to my family. That's me over there on the left, Gray, and me. Still rocking my J's though. If anybody's got the shoe culture down there, there's only one shoe to wear. But anyway, next to me is my wife, Shannon. We've been together for almost 20 years now, I think, or actually probably over 20 years. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and one of the reasons why we are still married, with all that information. Next to her is my son, Justice. He is 14 years old, getting ready to go into ninth grade. He's an amazing little dude, but comes with some struggle as well. He's actually got epilepsy. And the last 5 years is something that we've been really battling to try and keep him healthy and keep his spirits up. And somehow as parents try and live through that process without being filled with anxiety and PTSD and all the other stuff that goes along. If you're a parent or anybody that loves somebody with epilepsy, you understand that struggle. Our job is to try and keep that smile on that kid's face as long as possible. Next to him is my son, Jordan. Jordan is 20 years old. He is a sophomore at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He's studying biochemistry. He's an amazing kid too. Super brilliant, super bright, but also has some executive functioning things we've been working with on his whole life. If you're a parent or you know somebody that's super bright and's got other challenges, this is another thing that we've been working on in our family a whole lot, is again to try and keep him feeling good about himself in all of his gifts, but also still work on some of those things socially that sometimes might be difficult. And next to him is Zoe. And that is not our daughter. That's my son's girlfriend and somebody that we've really kind of welcomed into our family. Just kind of a weird story behind that. She used to be Justice's nanny. And then through that process, she already knew my son, Jordan, but just kind of being close to the family and everything happened. Now, all of a sudden they're this wonderful couple and they've been together for a couple of years now. And when we took this picture, we're like, you're part of our family. So we love you there. She's an amazing girl. And this right here, if you're looking, like, if you want to know me, this is me. This is everything that I've created and everything that I really pour into. When people ask me why I do this work, it's for this. I always say, like, I just want to create a softer world for the people that I love to grow up in. And by proxy, whoever is on this call, you're part of that world. So that's why we're here today. All right. Now, truth talk. The very first thing I want to talk about, I'm just going to give you lessons. Let me stop sharing this because you don't need to keep seeing my family. You need to see me for a second. The first lesson that we're going to talk about, truth talk. The first lesson is to understand that knowledge is amazing, but the application of that knowledge is what changes us. Now, I'm going to be on this thing for the next hour and a half. And I'm going to give you all kinds of information, but the truth is that does not change you. Just like we, live life and we have life experiences. One of my favorite quotes says, experience isn't what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. Just because you go through stuff, it doesn't make anything any different. So the first thing that I want to start off with, and the truth that we need to swallow, is knowledge does not change anything. I remember I was walking through an airport and I saw a dude with his shirt that said, knowledge is power. And I went up to him and I said, kinda. And he kind of looked at me angrily. And I said, applied knowledge is power. Just because we know does not mean anything. And so as we kind of get through this information, and maybe you have all the information in the back of your head, if things aren't aligned in your life or if things aren't changing, part of it isn't trying to get more information of what we need to do. It's really just applying the stuff that we already know and be intentful about those choices. And it's easier to say than to do. Even myself in this last 10 months, when my business has been turned on its head, I have a lot of information of what hope is and be able to inspire people. But there's times when I still feel unhealthy in my own mental, there's times when I'm dealing with my own depression. And even myself have to remind, like, I got to use the information I know and not get so caught up in just how things feel. Okay. So the first truth talk that we want to give you is knowledge is amazing, but applied knowledge is actually what makes a difference in life. There's a cool saying that says that the bigger the gap between what you know and what you apply, the more dysfunction that you'll have in your life. So let's start there. The first truth talk to swallow is we got to apply what we know. Now, one of the things that I know that we need to do a little bit more of is to figure out who people are, right? I gave you a little introduction to who I am, but we're going to play a little game called What We've Got. And so Scott, right now, if you can, I'm going to have us break out into rooms and we're just going to be in pairs and dyads. And if you're watching at home, this is something that you can do as well. When we go to the breakout room, you can find somebody in your own house or even jump on a text and text somebody. But the idea is when we go into the breakout room, I'm going to give you 1.5 minutes on the clock. And your job is to find as many things in common that you have with the other person that you're talking with. Part of this process is how do you find those things? What are you trying to figure out that you have in common with? The bigger thing is, how does it feel? Okay. How does it feel to find commonalities with people? And why is this important when it comes to us growing? All right. So when you get into that, it's going to be a 5-minute breakout. 1.5 minutes will be trying to figure out what you have in common. You're going to have one person that's keeping a little tally mark, because when we come back, we're going to try and figure out who had the most. And typically in a minute and a half, you should have a list of at least 35 things, if not more. Okay. Once we get back into the room, we'll talk a little more about that process, but I also want you to catch yourself when the minute and a half is up. What do you do with the rest of that time? Okay. Because what we do with that time will tell us a little bit about ourselves. Okay. Scotty, can you break us up into groups? And you can put me into a group as well. I have no problem jumping in if we have odd numbers, or if you guys want to make that happen, then go for it. If you're sitting watching at home, this is the time for you to pick up your phone or have a conversation with somebody in your house and be a part of this thing too. All right, Scotty, go ahead and break us out, bud. 5 minutes.
I'm going to put you in with Carolyn and Kimberly. They're under the JL tag. Here we go, everybody. Jump in.
We are back. Scott, first of all, thanks for putting me in the group with the JL crew. I appreciate that. It was a little bit more difficult though, because we had a mom and a couple kids, a 14 and a 16-year-old. So we were trying to find, what we had in common with the four of us, which is a little bit more difficult. So before we check in with our group, how did it go for who was paired up? Can you give me your experience? Most specifically, what did it feel like to try and find things that you had in common with people?
Renee, I see you're unmuted. Christina, you want to give it a go?
First of all, start with how many things did you have in common? What was your number?
I think we were like 10 or 9. Yeah, that minute and a half went really fast. Yeah.
What makes it go fast?
Trying to figure out what to ask.
How did you come up with what you were going to ask? Where did you start with?
Easy stuff like, do you like coffee?
Right. Okay, so you got 10 or 12.
Yeah.
What did it feel like?
Renee?
Well, I know Christina, so I think that might have been a little bit different for people than people who don't know each other. So yes, I felt comfortable, we felt comfortable kind of asking each other what we liked. So
do you feel that, because you said like it was easier, but you only came up with 10 or 12. And my thought process in that is, in relationships that we have with people that we already know, do we keep seeking to invest in finding out more? Do we're like, oh, I already know Christina, she's, and then we talk about coffee for a little bit instead of really like trying to dig in. Cause do we really know everything about people, even though we know them for a long time? 10 or 12 things, if you guys knew each other, you should be like, hey, I know what we like. Let's just rock this thing and come with a list of 40.
Yeah, well, I had to talk Renee away from the work conversation and that first 30 seconds. But you know what? You make a really good point, because sometimes you don't even have to have a lot of stuff in common with somebody, but you still have a great relationship. And I think that was kind of one of the things that I saw.
Now, the point I would also say when you're like, it's hard because I had to get her away from the work conversation. The other thing I just want to mention with this is time, and the idea of like, oh, we're given a minute and a half, and if we use 30 seconds of it talking about something that is kind of, not necessarily part of what we're about. I think a lot of us, human nature wise, we're like, oh, we'll get to that. But the idea is we don't know how much time that we have in anything. And so how do we, when we have these moments with people, to be in a room to be like, listen, let's not talk about some of those things or deal with this other stuff. Let's really figure out in this time, like who we are together, and not, because the other stuff is superficial in some regard, not to discount who we are as work people and all that. But this is about human connection. If we're going to be stronger as individuals and stronger as a community, it's really about investing in these moments. Okay. What else? Who else had some experience? Scott, who were you teamed up with? What'd you get?
I teamed up with Shelly, and I got to pick the rooms, and I picked Shelly because our relationship continues to develop. We're Facebook friends now, and I've learned so much about her from watching what she finds important enough to share with the people that are her Facebook friends. And, one of the things we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a list of 8. And what a compliment coming at you here, Shelly, and I think some other groups will probably experience this too. We found out that we both had owned motorcycles. Like Shelly rides a hog, and I used to ride like the complete opposite. It's like a moped. And to like picture her at a stoplight, like, and I pull up and it's like, we invested a pretty fair amount of time on that, because that's foundational, like to think of that imagery in our mind. So that definitely bogged us down as far as like aggregating a large number. But Shelly is so open and welcoming. She immediately started asking me questions about my experience on a motorcycle, instead of like, okay, we got that, check next. So I think it's a compliment to her that she genuinely cares about the things that we have in common.
Which is cool, right? There's no wrong way to invest in this kind of activity, because some people will say that. You're like, well, the first thing we landed on was motorcycles, and then we just talked about how much we love motorcycles. And so I don't know a whole lot, but I know the one thing that really matters, and we can vibe on that. Okay. Part of, though, I think for us to kind of keep expanding and growing as people is to get further away from those conversations that are supernatural and to figure out even more, like questions that give us even more context for who people are and what they value. I would argue that a lot of us ruminate on those things that we really love because it feels good to connect. But part of what we need to do in growth as people is to try and figure out who people are that we have in common, things that maybe some things that we don't even feel necessarily that good about. One of the questions I asked was, how many of you wish, or have you ever wished you had more money? Like crazy questions like that all of a sudden can get us to identify things of like, oh, like maybe we've understood the struggle, and understanding that struggle, then we can have even more conversation. And for me, it's like, how do I get as much from somebody in the shortest amount of time possible? And then when I have more time to reinvest, I know what to invest in. Okay. If we're working with young people specifically, I think we get involved in a lot of those conversations instead of really trying to figure out a lot of who these young people are in front of us. We're like, oh, you like music? Oh, you like Jays? Let's talk about Jays. Now, every time we connect, it's always about Jays. Again, there's no wrong way. Part of that whole process is, how did it feel to connect with somebody that way? That's the bigger question for me, is in that time that you had, what did it feel like to try and find things in common with people? JL, we were kind of together and we talked about this a little bit. Is there anything that you would say in our experience? I think our list was at 22 when we stopped. Are you there, JL? I know they said they might be driving. Nothing. Awkward silence is bad enough when we're in person, but no. Okay, JL.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. We were driving.
You're good.
At the same time. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So the question I had asked, and we kind of talked about in our breakout, was how did it feel to like try and find things in common with people? What did that process feel like?
I think it was a ton of fun. It was really fun to get to know someone you never met before, and especially online. Oh. I think it's interesting because actually within that like 5 minutes, we actually got to know you like really well. I mean, we had a lot of things in common.
Yeah. And we're just throwing things. Like, I'm just like, do you like this? Actually, the very first thing I said was, do you want me to go first? Or like, how do you want to do this process? And that whole idea of us growing is like intentful choices, which is, I know this is a mom with a couple kids. I have no idea how old the kids are. So it's like, let's connect. How can I make you feel comfortable in this? And maybe one of the things that we have in common is this idea of compassion and empathy for other people. We didn't even get to that, but we're just trying to list off a lot of things. Part of why I bring this up is, I think for us, what hope is to me, and this idea of change and loving people, is to get away further from the conversations that are so divisive. And when we get in touch with people, to figure out what the things we have in common. I have somebody that lives next door to me that we're completely polar opposites. These people have a different kind of signs in their yard than what I have in my yard, but I still clean this dude. He's 78 years old, and I clean his white wall tires on his Thunderbird because he's my neighbor, and so we talk about cars, and we talk about his experience in the Navy, and we talk about all these other things, his family and his love for family, things that we can connect on to get away from all the other stuff that we are so invested in right now. When I say, how does it feel? What if everybody that you came in contact with, even the barista at Starbucks, if you're like, hey, 30 seconds, let's figure out how much we got in common. Go. You'll get some weird looks, but we waste 30 seconds all the time. Okay. All the time. Truth talk. Number 1, apply the knowledge, get to know people, right? Good job on the breakout. Lesson 2, we're good. Yes. High five on that, Scotty. Truth talk lesson number 2. You ready for this one? I got it on my list up here. It says emotional fluency. What that means is, if we're being real, if you don't have an idea of who you are and why you operate the way you do emotionally, you're always going to be the victim in the battle. Always. Emotional intelligence. It means investing in knowing you. There's this argument that most of us know more about other people than we know about ourselves because we're fans. We know about, the Kardashians, and we know about who your favorite athlete is because we follow them on social media, and we invest, and we look on Wikipedia pages, and we just compile all this information because we adore, we love, we admire, whatever that stuff is. But how many of us are really investing that same amount of time in figuring out who we are? Why do you operate the way you do? Why do you get so defensive when somebody challenges you in some way? Why do you get so hurt when somebody leaves unexpectedly? Like, if you can understand who you are, it makes all of the craziness in the world manageable, because you'll understand how you're going to operate within it. If you know anybody that works in emergency personnel services, like, I thought I wanted to be a paramedic once until I went on a ride along. And then I realized that blood wasn't my thing. In that process, if I don't know that, like, I get really emotional in those times, in those spaces, and if I don't understand that, I'm going to put myself in situations that I'm going to have a hard time managing it. Maybe another way to say it is, if you've ever traveled to another country, if you've ever been in a completely foreign land where you have zero understanding of the language. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish. Most of the traveling that I like to do is in Central and South America, because I love the culture and I also speak the language. So I don't freak out ever. It's actually really relaxing. If I'm in Mexico or any of those places for a long time, I start dreaming in Spanish. I wake up in the morning and it's just chill. I'm like, I can get wherever I need to get. I can navigate anything. Conversely, if I go to some country, if I'm in Russia, or if I'm in India, or if I'm in Italy, or some place where I don't know any, like Italy, probably different because I could probably make out some of the words, but let's go with Russian because they got different stuff. Okay. If I'm in that place and I have no fluency of that language, every time that I have to operate, anytime I have to use the restroom, anytime I got to call for a ride, anytime I got to order something at a restaurant, there's always anxiety in it. Do you guys feel what that means? Like, have you ever been in a country you don't know the language and you're like, man, I got to call for a car. Oh my gosh, I got to order food. Oh my gosh, I got to find a bathroom. Like, everything becomes anxiety filled. And I would argue that for us, if we don't have a fluency in our own emotions of why we operate, then the majority of days feel like that. So if we're going to master anything in life, it's not mastering curriculum. It's not mastering the Pythagorean theorem. If you're going to master one thing in this world, master you. Understand why you do the things you do and be real about it. I got lots of issues. I've been married almost 20 years. And to be in that relationship, I have to understand why I react the way that I react if I'm going to stay married. Otherwise, I will be the victim of it all and keep blaming my wife over and over for the things that I kind of have problems with. Okay. Part of that emotional fluency also, and having that kind of deep level of understanding, helps you go and problem solve in a different way. Instead of living in the what part, oh my gosh, this is what happened. My mom left me. I've been abandoned. I have these issues. That's the what part of the story. But if you understand who you are, you get to the what now, which is really crucial when you're trying to grow or change something in yourself, which isn't just to swim in the what of the story. It's the what now. Okay. And that only comes when you do some investment in trying to figure out who you are. The last thing that I have on my list up here is that feelings aren't facts. Okay. And I'll say that one again, feelings are not facts. And when we have no emotional fluency, a lot of times we get overwhelmed by our feelings and we think that that's the truth. When the truth is, feelings are momentary. It's not that they're not real, they're happening, but just because you feel something does not mean it's the truth. Okay. If you understand who you are, you start to kind of play that little game in your head, which is like, hold up, you messing with me right now? Like, you telling me to feel this certain way? Life is always going to be this way. It's always going to pervade all of my life. And when that becomes our mentality, we become filled with despair. And that's not what we're trying to be as people. Okay. Lesson 2, emotional fluency. If you're going to master anything, master you. All right. Now we're going to do another little breakout because time is speeding by here. The next truth talk that we're going to talk about is this concept of hope. And before we get into it, I just want to kind of get us in a breakout room, or we should probably still do breakouts. Maybe you can do them in 3s, Scotty. But our task, and again, if you're watching at home, this is just kind of another thing for you to process in your head, or if you're near somebody, to go ahead and ask them. But this breakout is going to focus around a time that you've been let down by hope. Okay, you get a lot of times people like me come in and be like, you guys want a new life? You just got to have hope. And you're sitting there like, fool, I've been hoping for 7 years. It don't work. Right? So in our breakout rooms, I want us just to talk very specifically about something that we have hoped for, that when we didn't get it, we kind of felt let down, that we even hoped for it. Okay. Now, before we start, Scott, as you go into breakout rooms, I want to give you permission to swim in an uncomfortable silence right now for about 30 seconds. Actually, here, I'll give us some background music. But I do this because when we get into that room and we don't have a whole lot of time in the room, I want you to kind of know what you want to talk about before you go into the room. Because if we don't, what's going to happen is when you're in the room, when somebody's sharing that time for them, instead of really listening, your mind's going to be formulating what you want to talk about. And you're going to miss the opportunity to be present and try and find more out about somebody else. So right now, I'm going to give you a little 30 seconds of maybe some strumming for you to figure out a time. I'm thinking that's about 30 seconds. Okay, you don't got to get too deep in this, but just realize it could be something very simple, something silly, but something that you've hoped for, that when you got let down, it didn't happen for you. You're like, dang, why did I even hope for that? All right, Scotty, get us into some breakout rooms. 5 minutes on the clock. On your mark, get set, go.
It's never enough time.
It never is.
Never.
I mean,
is.
an hour and a half is not enough time to be with somebody. And then when you throw the breakouts in, the hard part is when you start connecting about things that matter, we start to, realize how fast time goes. It's kind of, the other side of it is when we start to feel boredom in life, we realize that we're not invested in things that really matter. That's why time goes incredibly slow in those moments. Okay. I would love to get in deeper into, the ideas of what you guys talked about, but I also want to not lose out on time. And I'm assuming that you guys had some pretty amazing conversations about being let down. The one thing that I want to kind of talk about specifically in the truth talk portion is that hope is not a thought or a feeling or an emotion. Hope is a verb, and there's a science behind it. And if I want to teach you anything today, aside from all the other words that I have, the one thing that I want to redefine for us is how we see hope. Because so many of us are hoping and praying, like, I hope it changes. I hope I get out of this financial struggle. I hope COVID goes away. I hope my wife loves me. I hope. And if that's not being reciprocated, then we start to lose that feeling of like, this is possible. And when we talk about people that got mental health issues or anxiety filled or feeling lonely and despair, so much of it comes from that place of like, man, I've been hoping for a long time. And so what does it mean? First of all, when we are talking in our group is a lot of things that we say that we were hoping for, we're in other people, we're in other relationships. So it's with family dynamics. Like we talked about addiction a little bit. Like I hope that person gets sober. And then when you hope for so long and 10 years pass and they're still an addict, you're like, maybe I shouldn't hope anymore. When the truth is, hope is a very personal thing. And the only thing that you can control in life is you. And so part of it is, we talked specifically, Shelly, if you don't mind, she was talking about a family dynamic and, going into it, being hopeful that it's going to turn out some way. And the reality is it always turns into this mess. And maybe what you hope for isn't that the people in your family have a different dynamic. Maybe what you hope for is how you manage the dysfunction, because the dysfunction is not going away. But when we place hope in other places and other people, it's easy to lose it. When we place it in a personal spot and understand that it's a verb, which means most people want to be the noun without doing the verb. I hope I'm a great dad, but I don't want to do the work of being a great dad. I want to be a great guitarist, but I hope I can be good, but I don't want to do the work that it's going to take to be a good guitarist. So when we think about being hope-filled, it's a verb, which means there's action behind it. Now, the other thing I want you to understand is hope is a triangle. And if you could implant this in your head, and I'll put up a little graphic here, but next time you hear hope, I want you to see triangle. I'm going to share my screen real quick and we'll talk about the 3 parts of hope that really matter. This is Truth Talk number lesson 3, which is hope more, that hope is a verb. So let me share my screen and get you this graphic that explains what hope is. Okay. Now up on my screen right here, you see this triangle. This is what we call true hope. And what it means is all 3 of these sides of the triangle need to be working together for this common good. If you only have 2 of the 3 parts of this triangle or only 1 part, you're going to be hopeless. It's not going to work out for you. And then you're going to be bitter in life like so many people are. Okay. Hope is these 3 things. Now, at the very top is where we start. Is called the desired goal. It's something that we want to achieve. It's the dream, right? And we are naturally all dreamers. This isn't hard for us to try and think about something more than what we currently have. Like I got big dreams. The problem with dreams is typically we wake up from the dreams and we're still us. Okay. So this to me is kind of the easy part, hopefully. But there's also a truth in here that there's people that wake up every day without any purpose, without any goal. And maybe, if we're thinking about you guys at home watching, or if you're on the call in this pandemic time, some of the mental health issues that we dealt with was that we were waking up every day without any desired goal. And sometimes the goals are small, like just getting to work on time. Like that's a goal for some people. Like that's a tough thing. But if I could get there on time, and that little game that we play in our head that actually gets us achieving things, like humans are designed to be achievers. Like even the hunters and gatherers way back in the day, like it's what fuels us. We wake up with purpose and we go. So the first part is in your own life. If you're waking up without any desired goal in life, young or old, this is my problem with teachers a lot of the times is we're trying to get kids to dream. And we got a bunch of teachers that don't dream themselves. Like I'm 50 years old. I don't dream anymore. And you're like, what? You still got life to live, right? So the first part is find out what those goals are. And if you don't have something, it's going to be a long life, and not long like it's going to go fast and it's fun. Long like if you're in prison and it's got a 10-year sentence and you're like, dang, time's flying by, says nobody ever, right? So the first part that we talk about is you have to have something to wake up for. And it could be very simple, or it could be something that's much more grand. The harder parts are these bottom portions, way power and willpower. Way power will start there. What does that mean? It means, do you know the things that it's going to take to get you to that desired goal? And the cool part about us in life is most of us aren't information short on the things that we desire. You could talk to a kid and be like, you want to produce beats? Okay, I'm not a producer, but how do we do this? A kid could log on. They could actually type, how do I monetize the beats I make? You can go onto Instagram and drop into the DMs of your favorite producer. You can reach out to Raza and be like, hey, how do I do this? Okay, we're not information short on the way power side. The other thing to think about is if you don't know what to do, if you got something that you want, I'll use a specific example. Say you're a kid and you want to have a better relationship with your parents. You want your parents to be more trusting of you, right? And you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I would argue that every human, everybody on this call, everybody in this world knows one thing that they could be doing that they're currently not to get to that desired goal. Okay, most of us aren't dreaming about things we have zero concept of. You'd be like, oh, I want to have a closer relationship. Well, what's one more thing I could be doing? I can communicate better. I could tell my parents that I love them. I could help out around the house more. Like in my personal relationship with my wife, what's one thing I could be doing that I'm not right now that will help me get to this desired goal? Okay. So many times when we're swimming in uncertainty, we kind of feel lost. I don't know what to do next. But that's when I'd say, take a deep breath and really ask yourself, what's one thing I know? Talk about students that want to get good grades. What's something that you're not doing that you know if you did would help? Maybe I got to do my homework. Maybe I got to show up to class. Maybe I got to go talk to my teacher. And then just start with that one thing. The idea is you have a goal. We need to figure out what it's going to take to get there. Okay. The third part is really actually the toughest. That's willpower. We talk about this word all the time with young people and old people. What it means to me is, do you have the courage to do all those things that it's going to take to get you to that desired goal? I have on my list two words specifically: discipline and support. Okay. Willpower, what that is, it's unbelievable discipline. And there's a cool saying that I love that says, discipline is not something that's done to you, it's done for you. And that's a great thing as a parent. You can remind your kids when you're having to break them down and be like, listen, I'm holding you to this standard, not because I'm doing it to you, but I'm doing it for you. And even personally, when we are operating this space of hope, that discipline that you're doing to yourself is not to you, it's for you to help you get to that thing, right? The other thing is just support. Willpower is actually finite, which means you don't have gobs and gobs and gobs, but it just doesn't keep coming and coming and coming. We wake up in the morning, and depending upon what your goal is and how hard it is for you to actually stay focused on it, you kind of start to dip into this willpower reserve. It's kind of like you're playing a video game and you keep getting shot and you see your, your life level going down. The same thing happens with willpower. I would say for some of you, have you ever woke up in the morning with the best intent? You're like, I'm going to be on my healthy grind today. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to get my exercise in. I'm going to be strong today. I'm going to do it right today. And then you wake up in the morning, you have your little green smoothie because it's easy in the morning. And then it gets to be lunch and you're just eating almonds. You're snacking on a little almond nut, seeing if you can get 20 bites out of an almond, because that's what you do when you're struggling, And then you're like, willpower. I'm not going there. I'm not getting this. By the time it's 8 o'clock at night, you're like, listen, where's the pizza? Like, I've already imparted all of my willpower. And every time I do, it's stored in your glucose system, actually. And it's not like you can just eat a Snicker bar and all of a sudden be refilled with willpower. What it means is, if you are really trying to achieve something and you know that it's going to be a struggle for you, you have to have some support system. That's why addiction and people that go into recovery, that's what AA is all about. That's what going to meetings is about. It's the idea that when you wake up in the morning and you're trying to battle addiction, it's hard. And after about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're done. And that's when you need somebody to be there to remind you what you're trying to achieve. It's an accountability advocate. Okay. I got moment versus most on my list too. And this is something I love to talk to people about. And that's the idea. One of my favorite quotes says, the chief cause of failure is when you sacrifice what you want most for what feels good in a moment. Listen to that. Chief cause of failure is when you sacrifice what you want most for what feels good in a moment. People that are dream achievers, not just dreamers, people that are hope-filled and achieve, understand that they're willing to endure for that thing that they want most, for all those little things that might feel good. You're like, I want to be the first person in my family to go to college, which means I got to get good grades. That means something to me. Well, all of a sudden it's Friday night. My friends want to go out and hang out. I got a project that's due on Monday. Do I do what's fun and feels good in that moment? Or do I hold tight and be disciplined because I understand that really what I want most is going to take that? I have a quote on my notes up here that says, you have to give something up in order to move up. And it's not a one-time payment. You got to keep paying on that thing. Okay. Moment versus most. I'm going to close this down real fast right here. And I'll bring up this. I'll give you a little personal example real quick. This right here is my son, Justice. And this picture was taken. This is our dog, Yuki. Now, just to give you some context for this, my son has loved Huskies his whole life. For whatever reason, they're pretty dogs, whatever. When he got epilepsy, when he, was diagnosed with this and he's having all these seizures, we can't control it. Like our world is spinning. And as a dad, I like to feel like I have control and I can really kind of provide my kids this quality of life that's next level. And you realize really quickly in that moment that when epilepsy is a part of the situation, you can't control it. Even with medication, all that stuff, it's still its own beast. And so I'm starting to look for all kinds of ways that I could just find these little momentary victories as a dad that make me feel like I'm being a great dad. And so my son one day comes home and he goes, Dad, can we get a dog? And I'm like, listen, see, what I want most in life is freedom. And what that means to me is I don't want to have to think about when I leave the house, what was left on the floor. It means when we travel as a family, I don't want to have to think about where I'm boarding my dog. I don't want any of that. We have a dog already. Her name is Fiona and she's a Shorkie. It's a Shih Tzu and Yorkie half breed, but she's not a dog. She's like a Build-A-Bear. She's literally like a stuffed animal. You stick in a bag and be like, we're going. But a Husky is different. What I want most is freedom. But in that moment when my son, we went to this place and he comes with this dog and he goes, Dad, look at this dog. I looked at that dog right there, just kind of how you're looking at it. I'm like, damn, that's a pretty dog, man. That's a pretty dog. It's all white. And it said a mini Husky. I literally didn't ask any questions. I didn't ask the person like what it was bred with, what made it mini. I literally looked at the look my son had on its face and I looked at the dog. I'm like, that's a pretty dog. And I'm like, you could get it. I did no due diligence on what this thing was. If I'm being real, this is how I feel like a lot of younger people date. They just looking at something being like, damn, that's pretty. And they don't do any diligence to try and figure out everything that goes along with it. We get the dog. This is actually the very first day that my son brought the dog home. I took the pictures. He's walking in the door. A week passed. We have to take it to the vet. I walk into the vet eyes get all big and he goes, oh my God, do you know what you got? I said, I don't know, a pretty dog with a blue eye. I don't know. And he goes, no, man, you got a Klekai. I said, a what? And he goes, it's a Klekai. He said, it's a Siberian Husky that's mixed with a smaller dog to keep it mini. I said, oh, what was it bred with? And he said, a Shiba Inu. And I was like, a what? Because see, where I come from, we don't have the Shiba. I don't even know what that is. Like you got like guard dogs, you got Rottweilers, you got Dobermans, like a what? A Shiba Inu. He said, there's a couple of things you need to know about this dog. I said, tell me. He said, the first thing you need to know is that dog is a runner. He said, most dogs want to roam about 3 to 5 miles from their house. This dog wants to run 100 miles a day. He said, so I hope you like to run. I looked at my stomach. I said, clearly I don't, but okay. What else? What else do I need to know? And he said, this dog is an escape artist. It's a really intelligent dog. Matter of fact, if it gets over on you once, it will never not get over on you again. So be careful. I was like, damn, what did I get myself into? And this dog eats things. It escapes from things. This dog is crazy. There's a reason why Huskies next to Pit Bull are the most, they have the most of those in the pound because people are like, oh, it's a pretty dog. And then you're like, this is a wild animal. I hate this dog, y'all. I hate it. It's brought so much grief into my life. It's eaten so many things. It's chewed through the carpet down to our subfloor. Like it's eaten Xbox controllers. It's eaten Apple TVs. And I'm not talking about the remote. I'm talking about the whole chunky box. Like I can't tell you how much problems this dog has caused for us. Now, it's kind of a silly example, but it's moment versus most. Instead of holding tight to what I wanted, which is freedom, I could have loved my kid in 1,000 different ways. But what I did is I settled for what felt good in that moment. And now I live with that choice every day. Okay. For you in here, part of us in life, and even if you're at home, I should say, is always keeping in the forefront of our mind, what do we want most? And we have to be aware of it, because every day there's going to be things that pop up that are going to seem like this actually feels good relationally. Like, I want to be married forever. A little thing pops up. You're like, this could be fun for a minute. And it's going to be the destruction of everything I've been building for the last 20 years. Okay. Hope, willpower is so crucial in this thing. One last funny example. I'll stop sharing this, that I always like to kind of point out, is the one about a six pack. Like, I have a goal of having a six pack. I was talking to Scotty yesterday and he's like, yo, how's the Dorito thing going? Which is the Dorito back. And I'm like, it's not good, bro. It's not good. Here's the deal. Like, I could say that I want a six pack. Now, do I know what it takes to get a six pack? Do I know the ways? Absolutely. Right. I can log on to YouTube. I got friends that are fitness champions. I got friends that are, world-class athletes and stuntmen and women. I subscribe to Men's Health magazine. Like, I don't know what else you need. Sometimes I just rub it on my stomach to see if it helps, but it never does. I know everything it takes to get a six pack. The question is, do I have the willpower that when I wake up in the morning, or if I'm flying someplace into another state and I haven't eaten all day and I land at 10 o'clock at night and nobody's around, nobody sees, and I'm like, dang, it's been a long day. Let me just stop by that Whataburger, crush this burger and fries and a shake at 11 o'clock at night. Do I withhold from that? And then even worse, when I get to my hotel at 12, being like, I haven't run today, so let me put all my clothes on and go hit the treadmill and run for 6 miles and drink a gallon of water and do 5,000 sit-ups. Do I have the willpower to do that? Clearly, the answer is no. And the reason why, and this is really crucial for us, is because the thing that I say I care about, I really don't care about. I would rather be good for people than to look good for people. My life goal is not to look good. I mean, I'm a 47-year-old married man. What do I need a six pack for? For vanity. So I can look at myself and be like, yeah, fool, you did it. That's it. So if you're somebody in here and you say that you have a goal and you're not willing to do the work, it's a reminder for you that thing that you say you care about, you really don't. Because if you do care about it, you will never come up short on the willpower piece. Scotty's a brand new dad. I'm sure when it comes to the idea of like loving his daughter, it's not like, oh, do I want to go play my guitar? Do I want to go invest in this time? Like, what matters most to people will drive that. We can use addiction. I got a mom that's a hardcore drug addict. Okay. There's addicts, their desired goal every day is to get high. Way power. You've ever met a junkie that didn't know how to score drugs? No, they're super resourceful. One of the most resourceful kind of human around. They will steal stuff. They will hang out with drug dealers, hang out at drug houses. They will sell themselves. Like, every addict knows how to get the drug. The bigger question is willpower. You ever met an addict that woke up in the morning that was like, yo, I don't know, I have the strength to do this anymore? Very rare. Matter of fact, the junkie's greatest attribute is their willingness to endure whatever they can and will to get the thing that they want. They'd be like, I haven't slept in 3 days. I only got to walk 7 miles. Like, I'm in. So even in a really crazy way, the thing that matters most to people will always drive the willpower side. So make sure the things you put at the top of that thing that you're hoping for really matter. And then do the work. Hope is a verb. Okay. Look into my thing here. We good. Breakout 3. I got another breakout for us, Scotty. This breakout 3, and for you at home, this is a moment versus most conversation. And this one's going to be a little quicker. Scotty, I'm going to give us 3 minutes on the clock for this. Okay.
Okay.
And what that means is we can do groups of 3 again. And your question is for this moment versus most. And you could talk either side. Option 1 is something that you really wanted, that you sacrificed something in a moment for, and it caused you to lose that thing that you really wanted. Or conversely, what's something that you have like withheld on those moments for and actually endured and got that thing that you were really hoping for? I don't want to always just talk about the things that haven't worked out for us. If you want to talk about something that you've actually engaged in this process and you won because you fought off those momentary victories, then we can talk about that. Okay. Again, Scotty, I will give us 30 seconds real fast of some background music. I need you guys to all consider this again so you don't waste your time thinking about what you're going to talk about when somebody else is talking. Okay. So think about it for a second. I'll give you some more. There's your 30 seconds. Breakout rooms. Let's figure out moment versus most. How's this working out in our world? Have we been successful or have we actually failed in those moments? And can we be vulnerable enough to talk about it real quick? If you're watching at home, talk about this with the people that you're around. Break us out, Scotty.
Go. Same groups, by the way. Same groups.
team. We're all back together. Somebody talk to me about our experience in your guys' group. What did you talk about? Was it successful stuff? Was it not? Are you finding people in your breakouts that are just like steadfast and enduring for the things they want, or do we have impulsive people? Like, what's our life experience when it comes to this? Scotty, who are you grouped with?
I was grouped with Christina and Renee, and Christina and Renee both have some really neat examples of how they had to be steadfast for long periods of time in order for their goals to come up. But putting Renee on blast, because I love this lady. She's just the coolest. She interacts with this experience at this interesting distance. We all know that she had an intense challenge in the last couple of years. She wanted to leave California and move to Texas, which is right where those Dallas Cowboys, do their thing.
Where we lose it every year.
We lose it every year. But she had to work really, really hard for several years, and then, work with Shelly and the other people that she works with in order to purchase a home in Texas. And what's interesting is Christina and I were like, yeah, we've got these things. They kind of came to our mind fairly quickly because Christina's was recent and mine was like this other thing. And Shelly couldn't think of anything. And both Christina and I were like, you mean this huge life change? So I'm interested in how Renee couldn't come up with anything. And then it was like, oh yeah, that's super obvious. Anyways, there's information to be gained, inside of that. So that was my experience so far.
Interesting. That's one of the things, financial literacy, when we're talking to young people or old people, so much of being financially stable has to do with this moment versus most thing. If you're saving for something, if you're trying to buy a house, does going out to dinner really sound that important? Or am I trying to hold tight and just keep stockpiling all the things that I want for that thing that matters? Scott, you have a kind of interesting thing, which is I wonder why it didn't really, she didn't think about that, all of that struggle. And again, it just falls in this idea of perspective of either that wasn't a struggle for me. I cared so much about it. It's just kind of second nature. That's the top part of the triangle. And the willpower thing is it doesn't even seem like willpower because it means so much to you. Right. But the other side of it too is are we really that in touch with the things that we are sacrificing on a daily basis? And if we are, then it teaches us to be more grateful for the things that we have or the things that we're really kind of seeking for. Because if we're disconnected with that, it's we don't even give ourselves enough credit. We don't love on ourselves for the things that we are really holding tight for in those moments that matter. I will tell you really quickly, just for time's sake, our group is funny because, and I don't know if your group was the same, but it was I can relate to the dog story. I can relate to the dog story. And Scott, I know you have a dog story too that you can relate to that as well. Part of all this experience is to remind us to be aware, intentful choices matter when it comes to getting those things, but also to kind of have these conversations of who are you as a human and what are you giving up for the things that matter? And some people can identify those quickly. Some people can't. But to me, those are the conversations that I want to have, because the people that I want to surround myself with are going to be people that understand that hustle and hold each other accountable for it. That's what circles are for. That's what culture is for. That's what support is for. It's family is for. If you can build it, moment versus most. Before I leave the triangle thing, I have this cool saying that says 3 triangles a day keep all the crazy away. If you deal with anxiety or depression or boredom, these kinds of things that kind of drown us in a lot of ways, if you can come up with 3 triangles to work on concurrently with each other, maybe one of your triangles is about loving more. I want to have stronger relationships with the people I love. Now, all of a sudden, when you wake up every day, you're not bored, you don't know what to do. You're like, okay, I got a triangle. I'm working on building healthy relationships. Part of that way is to reach out to the people I love. So I need to call 3 people a day. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not trying to figure out what to do with my time. I'm like, oh, I'm working on finding out more in my relationships. I want to be better about being more passionate. So I'm going to put that at the top of my list. So what do I have to do that? I want to find things that I love, that I feel passionate about, invest time doing it. I want to care about money. I want to be financially stable. So if that's the thing, what are the ways I need to do? And instead of living in this depression and an anxiety, and not to minimize that because I deal with both of them, But it's the idea that if we can keep our mind focused on something, it gives our mind something to grab onto instead of swimming in all these unknowns and all the craziness. If you just wake up and focus on 3 things that you want to achieve and really care about them, a lot of this takes care of itself because we are really meant to achieve and we feel differently when we do. That's why so many people are all hyped when we get to show up and be around people again, because there's connection in it. But also for some of us, that's a goal, is to be enthralled with people, is to go meet people, to inspire people, to, have connections that matter. All right. 3 triangles a day, keep your crazy away. That's some truth talk. Truth talk, I got to get these last 2 I got on my list. Truth talk, lesson 5. Love is a choice. So choose wisely. Okay. Now, some of you are thinking to myself, like, what are you talking about? I don't know if on this call, if there's anybody that wants to argue with me that love is not a choice. But if you really get down to it, it truly is. I've been with my wife over 20 years. I would love to be the dude that comes on this call and is like, listen, every day I wake up, I just love my wife to pieces. No, there are days that we have conflict. Sometimes she's more crazy than me. And I look at her and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to choose to love you today. I know this isn't the whole you. I'm going to choose to love this. Some people are like, that's crazy. You don't love your wife. I'm like, clearly I love my wife. That's not what I'm talking about. But in those days when we start to battle, I got to choose love. I have 2 kids that I love dearly. Like my whole life has been about providing a different experience than what I grew up with these kids. I would be lying to you if I said there weren't days that I wake up and I look at my boys. I'm going to choose to love you today, you little punk. You've been a little crazy punk. I'm going to love you in this moment. And most specifically about ourselves. We talk about loving all kinds of other things, but choosing to love yourself is direly important. And some of us choose to love everything else but ourselves. And so how do we find in who we are the ability to choose love? The first part of that is to lose your ego. We have a friend named Cho Yoder, and I think she's the one that taught me this. It said, Jeremy, there's no ego in love. There cannot be ego in love. I love the guitar. The minute I have a big ego about playing the guitar is the minute I quit working on the fundamentals that make me a great guitarist. I want to be married my whole life to one woman. How is that going to work for me if I'm ego driven when it comes to our relationship, having to always be right, having to always have the answers? Okay. Part of what we want to do when we say love more and choose to love more is to get out of our own ego and what love means to us and start to just invest in it, and not just in other people, but in who we are. Perspective is huge in this idea of love, especially when you can get outside of your ego. I'll give you a specific example. And Scotty, I don't know if you even heard this story because it's something that we talked about a long time ago that actually came to fruition. When my son got epilepsy, he was having seizures in our house without us even knowing. And so what we had to get some Nest cameras around, right? And the wonderful thing about Nest cameras is they capture audio and video, which is cool. And that's really important, and why I'm bringing this up, because my wife has this great gift of when we're in the middle of a conversation, she'll switch up what we're talking about and then say something different. And me, on the other hand, I have an autographic memory. So when you tell me something once, I can recite it back to you word for word, because that's the way my brain works. So we'll be in the middle of a conversation. You might call them an argument, but semantically, whatever, it's not important. We be talking and she will say something different. I'm like, that's not what you just said 5 minutes ago. And she's like, yes, I did. I said, no, it's not. And we always get into these battles. And I remember one day we were in the kitchen and the same thing happened. And that day I remembered, I was like, oh, hold up. So I paused. You're right. I thought about the Nest camera. I'm ashamed to tell you how fast I ran up my stairs to go get my computer out, because I was going to grill my wife. Like I couldn't contain my excitement. I ran up those stairs so fast. I pulled up my camera. Oh my God, I can't wait to break you. I pull up the footage. I'm watching to see when I walk into the frame of the kitchen. And I do. And I press play right there. I turn the volume up a little bit more because I'm just so excited. I'm so excited. And you know what happened? You know what I saw? I saw me. I saw me standing over my wife in a posture that was shameful. I heard the words that were coming out of my mouth, and certainly didn't sound the way they go through my filter. I heard them differently in the way that she hears them. And it was shameful. I'm this dude that's a speaker. I know how my voice sounds. I know the way I'm supposed to talk to people. But in those moments that get super heated, I realized I wasn't the same dude that I thought I was, because my ego drives it differently. So in that moment, instead of realizing that it's not my wife's issue, I start crying because I was like, damn. I take my laptop downstairs. I come down and I'm like crying. She's like, what's wrong with you now? Because I cry all the time. And I'm like, I'm sorry. She's like, for what? And I show her. And she kind of like, yeah. That's the marriage and family therapist in her. She like just shows the mirror back up to me. Yeah, you saw that right. It's a conversation, Scott, we had around a campfire about this idea of if you can see yourself from a distance. And it was the first time I saw myself from a distance, not theoretically, but I saw it. And I wasn't proud of it. It was shameful. If we could see from a distance how we love each other, ourselves, is it something that we'd be proud of? Or is it something that we want to work on a little bit more? Because we realize in life, we got to hope more, but we also got to love more. And the only way that we could do that is to lose sight of who we are and the ego of us and trying to always be right. And again, sometimes it's masking all this great stuff that we tell ourselves of why we're doing this and how we're doing it. When the truth is, can we switch our perspective and maybe see it from a different side? That person that is the most challenging to love, if we can switch that perspective and have some grace for those people, maybe it's even easier to love them than some of the people that we've been loving for a long time, because you have a different perspective in the way that you see them. This concept of really loving. I asked a question about boredom. How many of you guys feel bored in life? And a lot of people say me. You talk to young people. Most young people will be like, I'm bored. This is stupid. Look where I live. And you're like, well, boredom is a sign that you don't love anything. If you are bored, it means you haven't figured out what you love in life like you used to. When you were a little kid, you were never bored. You didn't have toy. You'd be out with your matchbox and all the dirt running up on the trees. Like, you guys, it was a paradise up there. Like most kids be like, this ain't paradise. Back in the day when you had imagination and creativity or those things that you loved, you were never bored. But now all of a sudden when we grow, we lose those things that we used to love and we don't replace them with new things. I would argue, I can't tell you the last time I had 15 minutes on my hands and I was bored. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I got a problem. I have a list of too many things I want to do. So even that concept of boredom, next time you feel boredom, that's the reminder for you that you don't love anything yet. Or I always challenge young people and be like, how many of you guys get bored? And they all raise their hands. I'm like, how many of you are in a relationship? And they all raise their hands. And I'm like, maybe you should break up with your person because you can't be bored and be in love at the same time. Those two things do not coexist. That's a funny story. I was doing a freshman orientation and I said that. I was like, listen, if you raise your hand, then maybe when you leave this orientation today, you should go up and break up with your person. That night I'm in a hotel. I get some direct messages. I open one up and this dude goes, hey, I was at your program today. It was really awesome, but I just want you to know my girlfriend broke up with me. And I didn't know how to respond. I was like, yo, you joking? Like, you for real? You like, what? And he goes, yeah, for real, for real. And you know what my honest response back was? It was, well, at least you know she never loved you. And some people are like, damn, that's gangster, fool. That's mean. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's the truth. Like if some girl saw like an hour program and that was enough to end a relationship, y'all were never in a relationship. And maybe the best thing I could do for you is to be real, give you some truth talk. The larger thing is, why do you want a girlfriend and be in a relationship when you're a freshman in high school anyway? Truth talk. We need to love more. Switch perspective, lose the ego, make sure you choose love. And choose to love yourself first before anybody else. Last thing I got on my list is to do more. A couple things I want to give you very specifically is not just to have more hope in life. It's not just to love more, but the truth is if we want any different version of who we are or a different life or any kind of growth, we need to do more. And sometimes that sounds scary because you're like, people are always asking me to do more. What's that mean? But I'm going to give you a couple very specific things to think about, and they're not hard. Okay. The first concept of doing more is to laugh more. Like surround yourself with people that make you laugh. Go watch comedies as opposed to more crime documentaries. Go, stand-up stuff. Whatever you could do to chuckle is going to be healing for you. We can't get too deep into the science of laughter, but it releases these endorphins in your brain. Every time that you laugh, it makes you feel good. So many times when we get into spaces where we start feeling isolated or alone or despair filled, we don't laugh anymore. And so even our body's natural ability to heal us, we take that away because we want to just swim in the despair. Okay. So whatever you could do to laugh a little bit more, do it. Follow people on Instagram that actually make you laugh, as opposed to look at their bodies that you'll never have and be like, dang, I wish I could look like that. Like, watch people that are funny. And just the laughter alone will make you feel better. Okay. Number 2 on my list down here is movement matters. And what that means is if you're somebody that deals with anxiety, depression, mental health issues, there's a cool saying that says for every half hour of physical activity, you get 12 hours of healthy brain function. And what that means is if you wake up in the morning and you do a half hour of something, and I'm not saying you got to CrossFit, walk the dog, go stretch, do some push-ups or sit-ups, whatever it is, just walk. Do 30 minutes of that. It'll get you 12 hours, which gets you through the majority of the day. Now, if you're somebody like me that hits a wall around 3 or 4, then you exercise for another half hour more, and that gets you through the night. And then you wake up again and you do it the next day. The problem for a lot of us is when we start to feel these pits of despair and hopelessness, we quit moving. This pandemic, part of what happened was we took all the movement away from our young people, extracurricular activities, walking to everything. And we're like, sit in your room, stay safe, be on a screen, which is what was necessary in the moment. But think about what it does to our mental health when we don't even have the ability for, again, a natural healing system in us is taken away. We also become more sedentary just as a culture, which means we have to keep promoting movement. And again, it doesn't have to be, you need to have 2% body fat and be on the CrossFit games. I don't even know if CrossFit's a thing anymore. It might've come and passed. Scott, that's when you're like talking about Facebook friends. I wanted to talk to the young people that might be watching. Facebook is like MySpace for adults. We'll talk about that later if you need to know what Facebook is. I'm running out of time, but that's a Scott Facebook friends. Anyway, move. You got to move. The last thing I want to talk about really quickly is this concept of doing more, which means to be more confident. And a lot of times people talk about confident and courage and intertwine those words. And the truth is we can develop confidence. There's a cool saying that says confidence can't be conjured. And what that means is in those moments when you need to step to something, if you haven't put in the work, you're not going to be confident. You can't all of a sudden be like, I've never spoke to 2,000 people. I want to feel confident and then get on stage and feel it. It does not work that way. Confidence is something that you develop through doing something over and over and over again. I always like to reference Michael Jordan when he's shooting a free throw with his eyes closed against the Denver Nuggets, Mutombo. Now, for the greatest player on earth to get on a national televised game and shoot a free throw with his eyes closed, that's confidence. And it's so confident. He's like, I've done this 100,000 times. I could do it with my eyes closed. Like, that's the only way you're going to step to something. We have a lot of young people that lack confidence in the things that they care about. And what I want to try and do is remind folks that if you want to be confident, you just got to start doing the thing you want to be confident in. It's the only way that you can develop it. It's over and over and over again. Now, courage, what courage is what you impart, what you bring in when you don't have confidence. If you've never spoken in front of 2,000 people and somebody's like, here's a mic, go hit it. You're like, I'm not confident, but I got courage. I will go try. And courage is something that we can learn too. And the way that we learn courage and even a little bit of confidence is to make promises to ourselves that we keep. Every promise that you make to yourself and you keep, it's only going to develop this thing inside of you, which is like, listen, I could be courageous because I don't let myself down. When I go run, I'll be out on a road. I'm like, I'm going to run 5 miles today. And after 4, I'm dragging. And I'm like, maybe I should just call it quits. Nobody knows. Or if I'm doing curls out back, I'm like, I'm going to do 20 curls. And I start to get tired at 13. I could very simply put the weights down and nobody will know. Nobody will judge me. Nothing. But I want to teach myself that every time that I tell myself I'm going to do something, I'm going to show up for myself. I will not let myself down. This world is filled with people that will let me down, but I will never be the one that does that. So you have courage. The other thing I would just say really quickly is if you get nervous about something, nerves aren't bad. Nerves mean something matters. So you'd be like, I'm confident, but I'm nervous. I still get nervous every time I get in front of 2,000 people to speak. Not because I don't have the skill set. It's because I care, because I want to be good. It's that concept of never let them see you sweat. No, show them you're sweating because it means that matters. I'm sweating right now in a room of my own house, talking to some people. I don't know that. I mean, I know you, but I'm saying like, and it's still, I'm like, my whole body is like alert system. Like, Jeremy, this isn't normal. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. But I also know I don't let myself down, which means I don't let people down in that regard. Okay. Last thing I want to say real quick, and I don't want to go over, so I'm going to skip this last breakout, Scott, to be respectful of time, but I do have one last breakout, and I would still encourage you to do it away from this setting. And it's called Blankies Aren't Forever. And we're in a little position in our house right now where my little son, who's 14, has had a little blankie his whole life. And it's been such, like, we actually had two. We lost one. We were up in San Francisco, like walking through Haight and Ashbury, and my son's in a backpack thing. And we get into the cab, and all of a sudden he's like, "Where's Blanky?" And I'm like, "Oh, we lost one." But we still had one more. And it goes everywhere with us. Like, it's one of our biggest anxieties as a family is, where's Blanky? Well, we've been looking for this Blanky for 2 weeks and we can't find it. They were at Disneyland. I'm like, "Did you leave it at Disneyland?" I don't even know. But I remember having the conversation with my son, which is like, "Bud, at some level, you're going to outgrow this. Like, you're going to have this Blanky forever. And if you do lose it, so what?" And so I put on here, which is, what are you willing to let go of and grow out of in order to find this new version of you, to get to those things that you really value or that you really want? Because you're going to have to give up something. You're going to have to outgrow something. And that could be a mentality. It could be a way of thinking. It could be, habits that you've developed. The whole idea is we're going to have to give up something and outgrow something. I used to joke like, I want to be buried with Blankies so I could huff on it, when I'm in my casket or something. But the truth is, everything is temporary. Nothing is forever. It's all moments. Life is about all these moments. And some of those things we have to transition out of and grow out of. And it doesn't mean life is any less valuable. My son still sleeps wonderfully. He just doesn't have that thing. And maybe I'm telling myself that to feel better about being neglectful and losing that thing. But maybe there's a lesson in that too, which is some of those things that we value most, really, what do they matter once they're done serving their purpose? The truth is, life is about progression, transition, which means you let stuff go and you move on to the next. And I think that's what we need to really focus on and who we are as people, letting go of who you are, who you've been, and grow into this new version. It's okay to be a little different. Okay. We're right at 2:31, which we're about over. I typically try and end these things with a head, heart, and feet conversation, which is I would just go to everybody on this call and have you identify something that you thought, something you felt, or something that you want to do differently with our time together. There's only a couple of us on the call. Is there any of you guys that would just chime in on this head, heart, feet piece, all this information that we've been given? Is there anything that's made you think, or that kind of like shook who you were, felt something in the conversation, or that, like, once this thing ends, you want to do differently?
I'm starting to ask myself, Jeremy, what am I ready to give up in order to level up? Like, what weight have I chosen to carry in order to level up? I really appreciate that question. I ask it often, but I love being asked to be introspected by a friend. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Christina, you got anything?
Okay, there we go. You know what? The knowledge, applied knowledge, all the knowledge in the world doesn't matter if you don't apply it. I think that's something I've really been trying to remind myself of lately. And so that I really appreciate that reminder, because sometimes, especially during COVID, it was really tough because there was a lot of time where everything was shut down. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do training. Okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm work at this. But the unfortunate thing is I didn't have anywhere to practice it because everything was shut down. So it's like applying that has been something that I really am working on. So thank you for that reminder. So important.
Awesome. Thank you. Serenity, are you still there? Or?
I am. I'm still here. Thank you.
Head, heart, or feet? Anything that you thought, felt, or want to do differently?
I loved the part of when you're nervous, it means something matters to you, because I always judge myself for being nervous. I'm like, you got this. Why are you so nervous? But I am embracing that. I got a lot out of everything, like, with what am I willing to the now versus later thing, like the story with the puppy.
Moment versus most.
Yes, moment versus most. And I've been really like this last weekend, I played a disc golf tournament, even though, I didn't want to finish it. I had some things happening within, my life that it was a struggle and I wanted to give up and I didn't. And I ended up like taking first place, and the mental fortitude took for me to, and it was a crazy tournament. Like that's quite a good feat to take first place. And I persevered, and I know that I'll take that experience, that I needed that experience to, prepare me for, taking on the World's tournament next month. So yeah.
Literally the world.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Shelly?
Oh yeah,
quick?
So many things resonated. I will just say the one thing that I'm really hanging on to right now is having grace for people that can be the most challenging. And it's something I know, but just hearing the way, I just got to say, the way you are able, you put things into words in such a meaningful way. So I took notes, just a lot of nuggets that you offered are things that I felt like I already kind of had heard before, but the way you are imparting this wisdom with us is just so unique and so meaningful. And I just hope that I can share some of the nuggets that you pass them on, pay them forward, because they're gems. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Renee, I think you're our last one on there. I'm not sure if JL is still around, but anything else you want to add? Head, heart, or feet?
Hi, Jeremy. Yeah, I just, the one thing that I wanted to add, I mean, I loved everything you said, but the choosing to love yourself, I think that's good for everyone to remember and keep at the forefront, not lose sight of that.
Absolutely. I always joke with people and say we tell ourselves things that we would never say to other people. Like you would never walk up to some stranger and be like, wow, you look kind of fat, you fatty, but how many of us have looked in the mirror and you're like, damn, you look kind of fat today, fatty. Like the things that we say to ourselves and the way we treat ourselves, we would never do to other people. We don't consider ourselves bullies, but sometimes we're our biggest bully to who we are as people. We don't have grace for us. We're taught to give it to everybody else, but we're the ones that need it most because we're the only ones that know our true story. So thanks for sharing that, Renee. I appreciate that. I know we're a couple minutes late, but this is kind of what's right on time for me. So I appreciate you guys sticking with it. For those of you guys that are still at home that are watching too, thanks for being a part of it. Maybe you aren't here with us, but hopefully you get something out of this. When you do watch. The last thing I just want to say is thanks, Scott, for being a great friend and keeping me involved with all of the great work that you're doing. Serenity, Shelly, I've known some of you guys for a long time. And so to be a resource for people that I care about, that I know are great humans doing some amazing work, I just want to say thanks. And Paradise Parks and Rec for funding it, or whoever is doing all this stuff. I just say thank you. That's my dog. Hey, one last fun screen share. I know I said I hated this dog, but this is actually Yuki. And I love this dog. I have a love-hate relationship. This is Yuki 95% of the time. 5% she's crazy, 95% she's this. And the last reminder that I will say is let's choose to focus on the 95% of the good. Because if I focus on the 5%, I want to like kill this dog at times. But I know exactly who she is. She's a sweet, unbelievable. I have a healthy love affair with this dog. I say I hate her, but it's like a love-hate thing. This is who that dog is. So just to end it on a different note, that's Yuki right there. So with that, my heart and my soul, I put it together and say, thanks for having me. Hope this information helps, and go out and find the best versions of you. Hope is a verb, folks.
Thank you, Jeremy. What a great way to send us off, culminating the experience for our, is this the 6th leadership retreat, Shelly, that we've, I think this is the 6th annual. So
I believe so.
All your hard work, coming to fruition, creating this platform for folks like Jeremy and Raza and Jay Ross and the Game Changers and Stan Padilla and Serenity and Christina and myself. So hats off to you, Shelly, and your team for creating this space and helping us all change the world just a little bit. So go ahead and wrap it up for us, Shelly, and then we'll log off so that this can be viewed at a later date.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody that participated and everybody that attended. And look for these. We will be letting everybody know how to view the replays. And again, thank you all.
All right. Take care out there, everybody.